Good morning. Okay, and let's get rid of the reverb there. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome. I can see a few people already joined. We'll get started, and as other people show up, they can catch up. This will be available also as a recording after the event. And I'll share the slides afterwards. So welcome, good morning. My name is Matthew Stibber. I'm founder and CEO at Articulate Marketing. That's us, that's what we do. I've been in this marketing game for B2B tech companies for more than 20 years, and we help progressive companies, particularly in health tech and environmental sector, with websites, brand strategy, copywriting, automation, and AI. If you would like me to do a free, no BS marketing review, look at your website, your thought leadership, your emails, and so on, I would be happy to do that. You can contact me, Matthew at Articulate Marketing. Also click on that link when you get the slides, and that will take you to my calendar booking, also articulatemarketing.com.meet. I'd be delighted to do it. There's no live chat on this for a variety of technical and other reasons, so please email me if you have any questions. I'd be delighted to hear from you. Okay, so let's get right to it. Oh no, I'm sorry, there's another quick plug. In 2 weeks I'm doing another webinar about HubSpot AI and the new features announced at Inbound. I need a couple of weeks just to play with them and make sure I know what I'm talking about. If you're into HubSpot at all, do join me for that. If you go to articulatemarketing.com/webinars, you can already register for that. So that's coming up. Okay, now email marketing. This is what you've come for. Thank you very much. Today I'm going to be talking about these different topics, basically trying to make emails more engaging, less spammy, less annoying, more deliverable, so that people actually look forward to getting your emails and engage with them. So I'm going to cover these 6 topics, and I've got recommendations and suggestions and experience in each area. So I'm going to start with crafting irresistible subject lines, and fundamentally the subject line is the invitation to the party. I mean, you've got, in a couple of seconds, if you're lucky, people look at the subject line and decide whether they want to open the email. If they don't open, nothing else happens, right? They don't read it, they don't engage, they don't build trust, they don't build awareness, they don't click on anything. So, that bit of writing in the subject line is the most important bit of writing you do with an email. I really like Scott Galloway. I read his emails with interest. He's always thought-provoking, a bit iconoclastic, outspoken, but always with data. You go look him up on Google and find these emails. You can actually read the library of them and register for new ones. His subject lines are always very interesting. This is one that, when I was preparing this, caught my eye. See what others miss. So what's interesting about this? Short words, flash of insight, little epiphany there. Okay, and if you're subscribed to this, you might know Scott Galloway as Prof G, a little bit of a hat tip to sort of gangster style. But I have a look at his other email subject lines and just see how he's done it. I have been writing titles for articles and indeed emails for a long time, and the best advice I've had about doing that comes from Donald Murray, who wrote a book called Writing to Deadline, which, if you can get a copy, is just fascinating and worth reading if you're even remotely interested in the craft of writing. His tip was write 50 headlines before you write the story, and out of that process of coming at it from different angles, you will find the story and you will find the perfect subject line. Well, okay, 50 might be a bit much, but he won a Pulitzer Prize, so he might be onto something. Okay. Next thing about subtitles, email subject lines, is interesting questions emerged in recent years whether or not to use emojis. And, I'm speaking as a person who's over 50 years old, so, I don't really speak fluent emoji and live in fear of a lawsuit because I accidentally used a flower pot and it has some suggestive sexual meaning or something. I don't know. There's this whole other world of emojis that I don't get. But in a subject line for an email, it can be eye-catching. So these were 3 emails that I screenshotted out of my inbox when I was preparing this talk. And HubSpot's a big business, and there's a little rocket emoji in there. Also an exclamation mark, which I abhor. And then there's Philips Hue, the lights, and they're using little emojis to call attention. If you're looking at a wall of emails, that little extra eye catch can be really worthwhile. I also noticed that Wired and HubSpot are using capitalized words, and that also can be a slightly softer eye catch. The challenge, the challenge with this is not necessarily knowing what they mean. I don't, that's, but also different email clients, different browsers render them differently. So, for example, you might think that you've picked a really good-looking emoji because you're picking something from Apple's character set and it looks really nice and rendered, and it gets rendered on somebody else's thing and it looks like a cartoon. I also think that not all email clients render them, so that can be weird. You can end up with little weird spaces that can be off-putting. And I never like to use the word unprofessional because I think it's one of those sort of catch-all words like solutions that means everything and nothing. But it can look a little bit, and for B2B marketing, that unprofessional thing can often cause discomfort for executive sponsors. Okay, personalization is another way of making email subject lines stand out, and I think actually this is most often used, and you can understand why. I picked this top one as an example. This is a HubSpot support ticket. And what was interesting about the personalization there was they didn't use my name, but they used the title that I had used to describe the problem. They used our HubSpot Hub ID. And so when I'm looking at that, I'm going, that has some trust and credibility because I recognize it. A sad fact, I actually know our HubSpot Hub ID. So there you go. That's an example of personalization that's really effective. And if you know something about people in your database, you can really use that. Using names, and so the LinkedIn example there, Matthew, start a conversation with your new connection and their name. I've tried to blur out personal identifiable information where appropriate. I didn't for the bottom two because they spammed me and they deserve it. It's interesting where it doesn't work. And so those two spam examples are examples of it not working. And it can make your email look weird, uncanny, and spammy. And we have, as human beings, really good detectors for bad data and bullshit. So, for example, whenever I see the name of the company, Articulate Brackets London Limited, that's our legal name, but that's not what we go by. So it's like somebody using the wrong name, and it just automatically means they've pulled that data from somewhere and they haven't used it. And the next one, they've used the right name, but I don't know if you can see it. There's a little extra space after the name. And that just, it's very subliminal, but it weirds me out. And I know that that's been spammed up. I mean, and much more obvious examples, of course, you will know from your own experience, like dear first name, right? Or dear token or whatever. They haven't done the mail merge properly, and then that just really jars. So you need to make sure you've got really good data quality. So if you know their first name and you go, hi Matthew, the name is capitalized, it doesn't have extra spaces in, and all of that sort of stuff. And also, if the database doesn't know the first name or the name of the company, if you're using that, you have a good fallback default option. So typically, you might have the fallback there. So you go, "Hi Matthew, hi there. We want to talk about growing your organization without more headcount rather than growing Articulate Marketing." But that getting the wording right and getting the fallback right is really important. I'll talk more about data quality later. Okay, so the next area that I want to explore is when you have got them to open the email and that first line turns into the rest of the email, how do you make sure that that brand voice is coming through loud and clear? Because this is the key thing, in my view, about building recognition, building trust, building engagement, is that your emails and indeed your website and indeed your content sort of sounds like you being the organization if you're more than one person. So there's a couple of examples that I picked of emails that have very distinctive tones of voice. Again, these are all examples of emails that I regularly get, look at, care about. Open. you will have your own selection and they can inspire you. So Seth Godin's always sort of referring to animal metaphors, and he writes these one-sentence paragraphs. So shaving the yak, purple cow, that sort of thing. So the resting language, short, punchy sentences. And I'm pretty sure that you could give me a Seth Godin email anonymized and I can tell you it's from him, right? Or it's a good impersonation. I quite like this Farnham Street blog and the brain food emails that come out, these tiny thoughts. I think Shane Parrish writes in aphorisms, and I think he's an aphorist. Sometimes they're a little bit zen, a little bit Zenglish, but again, it's a style and it makes for easy reading. And I quite like this one, asterisk, 2 asterisk, 3 asterisk. There's a sort of, he does that in all these emails. So there's a sort of a flow to it. There's more, it's a longer email, but that's the screenshot. And once again, our friend Scott Galloway, what's interesting about him is he's very trenchant. He has strong opinions about things, but he's always got, I mean, he must have a research team or something, but he's always got some data. He's always got some numbers to support his opinions. And I think that combination of really strong opinion plus this is why I believe this, or this is why it should catch your attention, really, really powerful. Especially, and a lot of our clients want to establish authority, and I think this is a really strong way of doing that. Curiously, a lot of people are very uncomfortable about having an opinion. So they want thought leadership. They say, help us with thought leadership. And then they go, oh, yeah, well, nobody here wants to say that. We don't want to alienate anyone. We don't want to accidentally exclude ourselves from some market opportunity by saying X, Y, and Z. I think you probably attract more people by having an opinion than you lose by people who don't like that opinion, right? I think bland and neutral is not the way to stand out, but it's easy for me to say that. I think when you develop your messaging platform, your tone of voice, and you really deeply understand your personas and you really deeply understand what makes your business special, and by the way, we can help with all of this, expressing opinions and having a characterful tone of voice that is still on brand and relevant for a B2B audience is really possible and actually highly valuable. And you think about the amount of work companies put into the design of their website. They care a lot about it. We certainly have a lot of meetings when we're building a website about design. Think about the effort that goes into naming a company or coming up with a logo, right? Not enough work goes into tone of voice, and I think it's more important than your website design vocabulary and more important than your logo in defining your brand. I believe that very strongly. Okay, AI is topic du jour, and I am an AI pragmatist. Full description, I'm a people first AI pragmatist. I did a webinar about a month or so back. If you're interested in my opinions and how we use AI at Articulate, go look at that, sign up and watch the video. It's on the website, articulatemarketing.com/webinar. So I won't go into all of that. However, I do not think that you should be using AI to automate or misautomate creation. I think do the work yourself. Think about what you want to say. Think about your tone of voice, whatever. And then use AI to provide support, be an assistant, a sounding board, a proofreader, and suggest things. So we, for example, have built a custom GPT in ChatGPT where we've uploaded our business plan, our marketing plan, our target personas, our ideal client profile, our tone of voice guidelines, our messaging, all that brand voice work, so that it's got a library of exactly, and that's been a lot of work to get that, sharpen that, think about all that. You think about all the hours you spend in meetings doing business planning, for example. And that's all in the custom GPT. So for example, I can then upload an email and say, can you suggest some titles for this email based on what you know about Articulate to make sure it's on brand? Can you suggest ways I could improve this email? Could you suggest some additional and you don't have to do everything. It says you don't have to automate and outsource your thinking and your humanity, but it can come up with some surprising things, and it can also spot typos and so on. So it's a very useful tool. And for example, when you're doing A/B testing subject lines, having it kind of generate 20 alternate subject lines for an email based on something, that's really interesting, because then your job is perhaps taking one that you like and tweaking it rather than having to sit there and brainstorm that work, doing that Donald Murray stuff. Okay, So that's my view on using AI with email. And the problem, sorry, kind of slight digression. The problem at the moment is if you look in your inbox right now, your spam folder right now, there is an awful lot of misautomated, crappy AI. And you can usually detect it because the first paragraph will be some sort of false praise based on your LinkedIn profile. I'm really impressed by the way that you're doing something, 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 blah, 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 articulate marketing, something. And it's sort of credible. I mean, it's sort of accurate as far as it goes, but it's really sort of BS. And you know that it's been written by AI, and you know that it's been sort of sent out by one of these platforms. Don't do that. All right, so how do you use thought leadership to make your emails stand out? Okay, and I think the rules of thought leadership. I might do another webinar about that. 40 webinars ago, I've talked about this before. The rules of thought leadership on your website, on your blog, on your podcast, on your webinar also apply to email. You need to be relevant, useful, interesting. If you can be a bit opinionated, provide some insight, make people see something they haven't seen before, experience something they haven't thought of before, provide news that is useful to them. So we spent several years writing a weekly email for a boutique air traffic management consultancy where they summarized out all the news and press releases and everything that was going on in their sector and sent it to people who were in the air traffic management world. It's a tiny, tiny audience. They didn't write a lot of original thought leadership. We did a bit for them. My favorite article was why does the Netherlands punch above its weight as an air traffic management powerhouse. Speaking Dutch and being interested in planes, it was actually quite fun to write, but probably not fun to read for anyone who isn't in the sector. Anyway, but it's an example of something that's really, really specific and useful to people in that sector. The emails and the roundup emails are really good. The article's really good. I picked this Chiswick W4. I don't live in Chiswick anymore. I'm out in the sticks now, but I still get this newsletter because I'm interested in what's going on in the old neighbourhood. And it's hyper local, hyper specific news. There's opinions. There's thoughts. It's interesting. And I'm not saying you have to write local news, but there are lots of ways of doing this. I think, though, it works if you've got something genuinely interesting to publish and say. So my preferred strategy is webinars, blogs, podcasts, and then use email to go, we've just got this new thing. Here is a summary. This is why it's interesting, and send that out to get people to come and look at it online. I've got one last tip on this before I move on to my next slide. Obviously you're trying to build authority, trust, engagement, get people to think of the sender company in a new light or be aware of the sender company. So think about the emails you get and the ones that you read and the ones that you ignore, and just for over the next week, think about every email that you open, not like from colleagues or something, but every email that you get that you've subscribed to or you get sent, and think, why am I not liking this? Why am I deleting it? Why am I spam filtering it? Why am I reading it? Why am I interested? Why do I still subscribe? And just ask yourself those questions about what is happening in those emails that you like, and go, okay, if we applied that to my business, to my marketing, what would we change? I think that your self-experience is actually a very good guide to building authority, trust, and engagement in emails. Okay, this format of email I really like. So I belong to the Agency Collective, which is a membership organization of marketing agency owners, founders. Okay, so very elite and exclusive club. And they write these emails where they're telling stories and they're inviting you to typically attend a webinar that they're running or an event that they're running, or find out more about something that they think is useful. And they don't do it as, we're running a webinar about EOS, as in the case of this email. They start with a really punchy question, then they tell a story. They tell a story about another agency where something happened, where in this case where they adopted EOS. They're using quotes. It's got a little bit of narrative to it. And, if you've ever sort of thought about story structure, this was happening for a long time, and then this happened, and so this happened, and then at the end here, everything changed. There's more to this email that explains what changed, but everything changed, the pivot of the story. This is classic Disney storytelling applied to a management system in a marketing agency. So highly targeted, highly relevant, really interesting, told beautifully, really engaging. Okay. I think another debate about thought leadership with email is, do you put the thought leadership in the email and therefore the email is the delivery mechanism for it? Or do you say, here's a summary, go read it over here? And I think a lot of marketing emails tend to do the latter. Why? Because you get somebody to come to the website, you can measure engagement in the email, you can see what people are clicking on, you can see what they're reading on the website, how long they spend, lots of analytics that probably you don't look at. Okay, but if you do, fine. Also, if you get them to the website, then you can do other things like get them to read something else or get them to engage in a CTA or whatever. But Substack's built a whole business of authors like Phillips O'Brien here, who I find fascinating. And by the way, if you're interested in what's going on in Ukraine, he's a very, very interesting source for that, with a lot of opinions and historical perspectives that you don't always see in the media. Anyway, so he's writing these emails every week on a Sunday and publishing them, and you read them in your browser. It's almost like reading a Sunday newspaper. I don't know there's a right or wrong answer for this. I think you've got to pick your moment, pick and judge what you're trying to achieve with the email. But there is a choice, and it's an important choice to make. Okay, so let's come on to segmentation and personalization, right? The first part of personalization is actually send an email from somebody, and I think it is a mark of some authenticity if you send it from somebody who's a real person who's actually connected to their inbox. And if you reply or get an out of office message, or you get a message saying this person's left the business, something happens to it, right? So I'm now, since the beginning of this year, going back to the practice we used to have at Articulate of sending the emails out with my name on and my reply address. That's literally, they're coming from HubSpot. They're being sent out by, in fairly large numbers from a marketing automation system. But if you just click reply, the reply comes into my Outlook inbox. And so when we do a big send for this, I get 100 out of office messages. But it's worth going through those, and occasionally get some message someone's left. I think that's authenticity. I think it's important that the footer has, an address and a phone number, so you know that it's coming from a real business and you haven't just set up a sort of fake domain name and you're sending a million emails from that and hoping that some of them get through. I think HubSpot's technique of being able to personalize the sender. So in our case, when we send some emails out, like registration emails for this sort of thing, if you are a client or a prospect or in a sales process with us, you're going to get sent that from your account owner or from somebody at Articulate or from head of sales rather than from my inbox. But it's still a real person. It's just choosing the right real person to send from. Yeah. I think it's also really important to put an easy unsubscribe button. HubSpot does this automatically. You should just be able to click and you're unsubscribed. I really, really, really hate unsubscribe buttons that send you to somewhere where you've then got to do some work to get unsubscribed. It should be painless. And by the way, much better if somebody unsubscribes from your emails and they label it as spam. Much better for you. I actually almost rejoice when I see people unsubscribing, because it's like, well, if you're not interested, I don't want to bother you, I don't want to send emails to you, I'm going to take you off my list. Thank you very much for communicating that. Okay, segmentation is the next thing. The more segmented your emails are, the better. So if you can do emails that are targeted, for example, to health tech, or in our case, or environmental tech, or data, or whatever. So we do a lot of work in our database, in our HubSpot CRM, to classify using a mix of automation and a mix of human review of high engagement, high quality contacts, people that we're interested in. So sales SQL plus typically. So there's human and automation in there. And what it means is, for example, with the registrations for a webinar, we can see, for a fairly large proportion of the people who are coming, hello everybody, what the breakdown is, what persona they are, what geography they're coming from, what sector they're in, what life cycle stage. But it also means we can send out emails. So now we're doing very targeted emails where we're doing a monthly newsletter and experimenting with that, and or maybe report on the results of that next year. But we're sending it out to different target ICPs and different target personas and personalizing or customizing the content accordingly. Okay, some data quality tips. I think it's really important that you do the GDPR thing and get rid of contacts that are not engaged, not listening. You've got no reason to process them anymore. And so we have a whole cascading process of just literally, you disengaged, haven't responded, haven't opened, unreachable, unsubscribed, more than 2 years, right, we're taking you out of our database. I think that deduplication is important. HubSpot can do some of this automatically, but actually just clean as you cook. So I make a point of going in when somebody signs up for a webinar and going and looking at their data and just making sure that, so if you've signed up and I recognize you, I've looked at your contact record and I've just made sure that that's okay. And I've enriched it and added some things. If somebody becomes a sales qualified lead at Articulate, we go manually enrich it. AI is already helping a lot with some of this classification. And a small thing about data quality is if you have people filling in forms, you can detect what time zone they're in, and you can target the email send so that it sends in at 4 o'clock in their time zone. And about a quarter of our contacts have time zone data. So what that means is that we're not sending people emails in the middle of the night if we know where they are. So that's a nice bit of data. Over the last year, I have removed about 50% of our contact database have just been deleted, right? We've just accumulated thousands and thousands of contacts. And I go into some client portals and they've got like 150,000 contacts. And you do a little bit of a test about whether they're deliverable or not. And 20% might be completely undeliverable, unsubscribed, bounced, or whatever. And they're just keeping these contacts as vanity contacts. There's nothing you can do with them. And of the remaining 50% in our database, we were retaining them for various reasons, like they once were involved in a deal or they were a former client or something like that. There's a lot of contacts that we kind of want to keep for historical record keeping, but they're unsubscribed or they've moved jobs or they've unreachable in some other way. So actually of the remaining 50% are classified as unreachable and we just don't send emails to them. So this sort of narrowing down, and I would rather have 1,000 engaged, segmented, up-to-date SQL contacts and engage them with targeted content that they would be interested in, I hope, than 10,000 names in a database and I don't know if they're deliverable or not and I don't know anything about them. So the grinding work to get this right is highly, highly valuable in my opinion. And we can help with that, by the way. Okay, so let's move on to deliverability. You need to make sure that your ducks are in a row with SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. And if you don't know what those things are, email me and we'll have a conversation. It's nerdy and complicated. You definitely need to get it right. I would say about 30% of the records that I look at are misconfigured in one way or another, or not configured at all, or not configured for the email marketing automation tool that people are using. So, guaranteed way of getting your email into a spam folder is screw that up. Make sure your emails are being tested for language in, Postmark spam check or something. So just words like free, just take them out. Just make sure that the AI tools and whatever that are scanning the emails don't pick up your email and spam filter them. Monitor your email health, make sure it's easy to unsubscribe, and ideally, if you can, go for double opt-in. If you can do this from the beginning so that you've tested people's... So basically, someone signs up for your newsletter, you send them an email going, is this the right email? Click yes. Then you've really validated it, and in some territories, you have to do that. Okay. Then make sure that you are filtering out non-recipients. You don't send an email that you suspect might not get through, and this is quite important because the ratios of bounced and unsubscribed and unopened emails also affect your spam filtering and spam reputation. So we've got a whole series of rules in HubSpot that basically test whether an email is undeliverable. We like Never Bounce. There are other tools that will check emails, email addresses to see if they're valid, but don't rely only on that. You need that and other things. Also, we're not giving legal advice here, but my understanding is that Poles, Germans, and Austrians, you should not be emailing them if you haven't had, really absolutely affirmative assent for them to be emailed, and you can actually end up getting quite a lot of grief by emailing them, and there are people in those countries who make a living suing companies that email you. I don't know what it's like living in Germany. I imagine it's a spam-free paradise, but who knows? Okay, so I'm nearly finished. I'm realizing I'm waffling on, and I've got another couple of things to go through. So do stick with me. If you have to drop off, you can catch the rest of this on the recording. But I've got about 4 or 5 more minutes. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is A/B testing. And I've got a couple of points to make here. First of all, I think different formats have different engagement rates. So long form, short form, little, those sort of magazine style emails. I'm not sure, by the way, a magazine style email where you've got like picture text, picture text, picture text, so that sort of thing works terribly well because so many email clients now block images, so you end up with just a very messy text email. I really like this. I had to go back into my archives to find it because I did actually unsubscribe because I was getting so many emails from Neil Patel. But this Neil Patel style email, really short, like almost like an email from a colleague. It's not using any fancy design. One CTA, here's the thing, click here to read this, and then he always puts a postscript, right? PS, here's another thing, and in this case, 2 postscripts. The postscript is a really powerful place in your email for action, right? Weird, but don't miss out on putting a postscript in your email. The other thing that I have found is you put the logo at the top of your email, just like Articulate Marketing logo. A lot of people click on it. And if you put an image at the top of the email, a lot of people click on it. Don't ask me why, but they do. So make sure that those are hyperlinked, and make sure that the alt tags are readable so that if the images are switched off in someone's email client, there's still something meaningful in that box. Okay. So try different formats of emails. For example, with webinars at Articulate, we send an invitation and we send another invitation. So sorry, you're getting 2 emails to come to these webinars. If you signed up for it off the first one, we don't send the second invitation to you, but not enough people sign up. Okay, that's an opportunity of testing different formats, and we've tried that. So text only or a more image heavy version. So but I don't think A/B testing email formats, unless you have a very large volume of emails that people open, is going to work. You want to do it more on a cohort test and see which ones sort of work. But for A/B testing, I'll come back to that. For A/B testing, subject lines is the biggest win you've got for anything here. If you take nothing away from this talk at all, A/B test your subject lines, because it's a little bit of work to come up with 2 or 3 variations or 2 variations, but there can be a big difference in the click-through rate, open rate rather. And HubSpot, other tools make it very easy to test that, but make the difference meaningful. So try short versus long, with and without emojis, with and without personalization. By the way, when we A/B tested that, personalization definitely had a better open rate. Try question statements, just test different things, and you will build up from multiple emails your experience of what works for your audience, right? What works for my audience might not work for yours. So test, 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 test. I'm just going to show you this one. Reallygoodemails.com is a library of really good emails. So if you're looking for inspiration, this is a really great place to go look. And you can tag, filter the emails and just see which ones stand out to you. Generally, they seem to be quite image-led, and keep a little reservation about whether image-led emails are the best, but that's an open and a discussable question. Okay, so that is the end of the core presentation. Again, do sign up for my AI webinar. Do get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. Do book up a marketing review if you would like, and I would be delighted to do that for you. And that is the end of the talk. Thank you for sticking with me as I went into overtime penalty shootout there. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day, everybody.